All right, so we're going to continue part 2 of the lesson we started on poetry. Let's get to it. We just spoke about rhythm and meter. The second one we have on our list amongst the fundamentals of poetry is rhyme. Now, I know a lot of you have heard this word rhyme, and let's define it and talk about it a little bit. So, rhyme here is the repetition of similar sounds, usually at the end of lines. All right, it can be, for example, you have the word cat, and then at the end of the first line, and then the second line, you have the word hat. So, cat, hat. So, cat and hat, these are words that sound the same. So, when you have this in a poetry, it's considered as a rhyme. Okay, or sometimes you have something called slant rhymes. So it will not really sound the same, but almost the same. For example, the word heart and the word startle. So heart, startle. Now, the third one we have here is imagery. Imagery is, let's break it down with the definition. In poetry, poetry is heavily relied on imagery, meaning it provides vivid image to appeal to our senses and sometimes creating that mental pictures. All right, it helps to evoke emotions and paint scenes in the reader's mind. Okay, so for example, sometimes you can use imagery or beauty is like a cloth over my heart. Okay, so different things you can use as imagery. Now we also have figurative languages. Let's get to them. Now poets usually use similes, metaphors, personification, hyperbole, a lot of them, to create meaningful way of communicating or connecting, their message. So we'll talk about them also. Lines and stanza structure. Let's talk about the structure of lines and stanzas. So poetry is divided into lines, which may be grouped into stanzas. So it's like paragraph kind of thing, like sentence and then paragraph. So lines, in English, you can use it like sentences, because that's the word for poetry, and stanzas like paragraph. Okay, so please know that today. And that structure allows the poem to flow, and it gives emphasis and also make the poem to appear to our own thoughts. Sound devices. There are a lot of sound devices we can use. For example, let me just try this joke. In French, usually people can use the word donc or bon. So we have sound devices in, poetry. So the ones that we have are alliteration, assonance, consonance. The most common is onomatopoeia. These things can add some sort of music, to enhance the auditory value or experience of poetry. Obviously, we'll talk about themes. So themes are generally the main or central idea. So the central idea or underlying message of the poem. Every poem have a specific message. Some poem can talk about love. Some poem can talk about death. Some poem can talk about fantasy and a lot of things. Okay. So others can talk about spirituality as well. So let's talk about mood and tune. Tune refers to the poet's attitude. The poet who's writing, the poetess is for female, poet is for male. The poet or poetess who's writing has a particular, feeling, certain attitude, all right, that making that poem to be, that evoke that poem. And then it gave that reader either joyful, feeling, it gave them nostalgic feelings or kind of defiant feelings, or just the feeling that will be developed after you've read the poem. All right, sometimes you feel happy, you feel, great, but then sometimes you feel sad. Okay, so that's tune and mood. The readers, we experience it after the poem has been read by that reader. And we'll talk about forms. There are other forms of poetry from different places across the globe. One common form is from England, sonnet, that we know about, 14 lines. We have from Japan, we have haiku, we have different places. We have ode, we have limerick, and we have free verse. Each of them have their own rules and tradition to follow, so you have to know about them. So for haiku, let's just talk about that briefly. It's about 17 lines, quick, not too hard, but then you have a structure. The first line will be five, the second line seven, the last line five, 5 7 5. That's haiku. And before we run through, we'll talk about basically 5 critical and crucial issues in poetry. If you want to write poems, these are 5 critical and crucial issues you need to know about. It should have been 10, but because of the length, we stick at 5. Emotional honesty, the first one. Poetry reflect, or it should reflect authentic emotion, forced or exaggerated feelings, may render a poem inauthentic. So if you're using too much force, it will not be looking too fine. So to try that emotional honesty, they reflect authentic emotion. 2, originality. Poets must strive to express familiar ideas in new ways. Avoid cliche, overuse imagery. It can weaken the poem. Okay? Avoid them. Audience understanding, the third one. A poem must, be clearly communicated, intentionally, and must provoke thought. You know, don't make it too over complex. Over complexity can make the reader run away from the poem. Flow and coherence. Even in free verse, like many other poems, it should have a flow. It should have a flow and inner logic, making sense. Disjointed images, can shift or confuse the reader. And last, we take as the first 5 is voice and style consistency. All right, so even in haiku, you should use voice and consistency. The first line must make something or have something to do with the second, and lastly the third line. Okay, a poem must maintain a consistent voice or tone, not too much different voices and all that. Unless you have that deliberate shift and use of dramatic effects sometimes, but it should have a consistent voice and tone. All right, so we'll talk briefly about, because I only want to make 2 videos. All right, we'll make 3 videos now, because we have like other juicy facts about poetry, okay, that we want to share with you. That's it for me. Please watch out for part 3 of our tips on poetry. Have a blessed day. Bye bye.